My name is Kenji Maeda. I am the Executive Director of the Greater Vancouver Professional Theatre Alliance. Thank you so much for coming here today as part of the working through this webinar series that we have put together to address topics and conversations that are related to the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're all kind of navigating through. Today and every day, I'm based on the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and something that is that I think about every day because it's important for me. It's one of the things that my dad always taught me was to always remember where you're from and where you are. And so my family's from Okinawa, and he never let me forget that. And so that really ingrained in me about the land and where we are actually working and living and playing in our own daily lives. So that's something that I wanted to acknowledge. And Mercedes Baines is here as well. And I'm really excited to have Mercedes, who's a facilitator and a writer and a psychotherapist. So a lot of expertise with a lot of focus around trauma, grief and loss, anxiety, depression, and in particular, interweaving psychotherapy with the creative process, which is super interesting to me. And I've had really great conversations with Mercedes around this. And one of the other things that I'm actually really excited about is because Mercedes has about 2 decades of experience in the Vancouver theater scene as a director, writer, producer, teacher, performer. So really understands the language of the arts and culture sector, what it means to be an artist, the struggles, the brilliance of what we offer to society. And so having somebody who can speak to both sides of understanding the arts with the psychotherapist background is something that I think would be really interesting as part of this process. For those of you who are new to Zoom, so there is a Q&A window and a chat window. So if you do have questions, Mercedes will have about a 30-minute presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity to have a conversation. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. If you are watching on Facebook Live, please do put your questions in the comments box, and we'll take a look at those as well and trying to address as many questions or comments that come through. And for those of you who might need captioning, we do have a live captioner. Thank you, Marianne, for being here to do that. So just turn on your captions in the Zoom window as well. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Mercedes and let you kind of take it away from here for the next little bit.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be in this virtual space and to be able to, I'm hoping, offer some small relief from some of the pressure that I know many of you are likely feeling for so many reasons, given the suddenness of how all of this transpired. So I'm going to be looking to my left every once in a while, and that's just because I want to make sure I'm on track and on my notes. So it's not my phone or anything. It's just to keep me focused. So I know there was an invitation to make sure you had something to write with. This is just this added reminder in case you were late to the party or you really wish that you had your purple pen instead of your blue pen. This is your time to go get that. You won't be missing anything because I'll just be talking just a tiny little bit of housekeeping. You have your water, or you really wished you had your pillow behind you. Just, I really want to encourage you to find as much comfort in this moment as you can. So if you're feeling like, sometimes as we do, we get feeling that like we're kind of trapped and we can't move because the webinar is on and I just have to be a good student. I'm going to invite you just to let go of that a little bit and just to bring something into your space if you need it, if it's close by, or if you have someone in your own living space who can bring that to you. So in this session, it's an invitation. And I'm going to invite you to engage in, I hope what you find are simple processes, but there's nothing in particular that you have to do. If something doesn't resonate with you, you don't want to do it, you want to do something different, The intention of this time is my hope to give a bit more space and grace for the experience that you are actually experiencing, as opposed to the experience you think you should be doing. There's lots of chatter in social media about busyness, and especially as creative people, oh, now I have this time to do all this stuff. But the thing is, this is not a staycation. This is a shock to the system, to our individual systems, and to the systems of our intersecting communities. And so as such, we may find the busyness can get more into a kind of frenetic thing, or we may find that we shut down. So I'm just wanting to really invite this sort of sense of a bit more space and grace for yourself, at least for the 20 or 30 minutes that I'm with you. However you are is invited and accepted today. However you're feeling, whatever's going on in your mind, that is permitted in this space. And I'm going to encourage you to give yourself that permission to have whatever experience you are experiencing with curiosity and kindness. So as I said before, the intention is hopefully to create a little bit of space for your experience, a little bit of space for yourself, to maybe increase your capacity to be present to the experience that you are experiencing. Many of you might have a noticing practice or a mindfulness practice. And so this might sound very familiar to you. And if it's not, and you don't have that practice, it's totally okay. One of the things from my perspective, one of the purposes, and this might be a reminder for some, but new information for others, to be present is to support your capacity to be more responsive versus reactive. When we're in a panic mode and we're doing things from a place of fear, that in the long term is very hard on our nervous systems. It also, in the long term, is not sustainable. Of course, panic has its purpose and fear has its purpose when there's an emergency. However, I think it's important for us to discern between urgent and an emergency, and important and an emergency. Sometimes it can feel very urgent, and we can get that agitation and panic mode feeling going. So this might be familiar to some of you. Certainly, I also feel that fear and that panic and have my cabin fever days as well. The other purpose is to hopefully help you feel more oriented and grounded. This is a very disorienting, or can be potentially very disorienting experience. Literally, we lose our footing. You might feel off balance, sometimes literally off balance, or you might just feel off, not quite yourself. And also the other intention is in the hopes to be able to notice the changing moment, because change is the constant. That's the only thing we can rely on. So I'll be borrowing from, I'm trained in somatic experiencing as a therapist. I'm a depth-oriented somatic therapist. So somatic means of the body. So I'm going to be inviting an embodied experience. I'm going to encourage you to go just as deep as what you feel you can manage right now. This doesn't need to be this deep experience. In fact, I encourage you to not take a deep dive. This is just a little experiment with being able to notice your body and your sensations, and helping you to come into more present focus, so you can be more responsive to your experience. So the first thing we'll do, and I'll talk you all through this, will be a thing that I call arriving. Then we'll be doing something called tracking, which is noticing your internal experience, orienting, and then we're going to explore maybe something that is uncomfortable for you right now or is causing difficulties using those tools. So the very first thing I want you to do is draw a circle in a circle, like a donut, if you can see this. So you're just going to draw a donut. It can be any kind of donut, but make the hole in the middle a bit big. So it's maybe somebody who's new to donut making, they've made a big hole in the donut. So you've just drawn a circle in a circle, and then you can just put it down for a moment. And now we're just going to begin to arrive. So what I mean by arriving is sometimes we're just not quite here. So you can close your eyes. You can just soften your gaze. And I'm just going to encourage you just to connect with your breath. Now there's lots of different kinds of breathing exercises. This one might be a little bit different for you because I'm just wanting you just to notice if you are breathing. Noticing the way that your body wants to breathe in this moment. So it might be a little shallow. It might be uneven. You might be breathing full breaths. And just letting your body breathe any way that it needs to. Sometimes when I do this, I notice that I want to do a big sigh. My body just wants to take a deeper breath in. And whatever you notice, just letting your body breathe. Without trying to muscle it, just letting your body breathe as it is. Allowing yourself to be more fully arrived in whatever room you are in your home, with all the sounds and people and creatures, and just letting yourself just arrive in this moment, arriving a little bit more in your body. And as you arrive, I want you to check in with how you're doing in this moment, like how you're feeling. So it might be a feeling word, it might be like a metaphor. So a feeling word is like mad, sad, glad, irritated, joyful. A metaphoric thing might be, I feel like a deflated balloon. I feel like I'm buried. I feel like I'm light as a feather. It could be a sensation. I feel hot, or I feel cold, or I feel tired. So however you're feeling, I want you to note it and write it in the inner circle, in that inside of the donut. So you're just writing that word on the inside. So I'm writing focused. I feel focused. Now, sometimes what can happen is we might have a feeling about our feeling, or a feeling about our experience. And this isn't good or bad. This is just something to notice. So do you have a particular stance about how you're feeling? So for example, say I might be feeling sad, but I'm irritated at myself for feeling sad because I shouldn't feel sad. Or maybe I feel good and I feel guilty that I feel good. So just to notice if there is a stance or a feeling around your feeling. And that's what I want you to put on the outer circle, the donut part. So in this circle, so I'm just write, how do I feel about being focused? I feel kind of pleased with myself that I feel focused, because we had some real tech difficulties. And so the fact that I'm able to focus, I'm feeling good about that, because our tech was a bit wobbly. My iPad did not want to engage with Zoom today. So I'm feeling pleased about feeling focused, right? I might have a different feeling. I might be worried that I'm focused because maybe the focus will go away and I might have anxiety about it. So in these next few minutes, I want to see if you can put a little bit more of your attention to the first feeling, the initial feeling. How am I feeling today in this moment? So now, as we've kind of identified what's going on with me and what's going on with you, you don't need to do anything particular about it. You've written it down, you've named it. If you chose that, you might just have made a mental note because you didn't feel like writing stuff down, and that's totally okay. Or writing stuff down is hard for you because you're holding a baby. So maybe you just made a mental note. So now we're going to go into a thing called tracking. And the tracking, this is from somatic experiencing practice, is noticing what your internal experience is all the way through your body from a sensation perspective. So again, you're going to maybe either close your eyes or soften your gaze. And I want you to imagine that your mind is a beautiful bowl of berries and it tumbles all the way down into your body. And I want you to notice, what sensations are you noticing in your body? Are you feeling comfortable, uncomfortable? Is there pain? Where is there comfort and discomfort? Is there any part that's feeling neutral or even pleasant? And just taking your time, letting yourself notice what's going on in your body. And you might even want to note a word or two on the outside of that circle on the rest of your page, or you can use a new page. What am I noticing in this moment? What am I noticing in my body? Like, for example, I notice my feet feel quite cold. I actually can feel the sensation of my heart beating. And I feel okay about that. I'm okay that my feet are cold. And I can feel my heart beating. Other times I might not feel okay about that. And as you notice that, is there anything that you need to do with your body that feels right? So like for me, I want to take a breath. Does your body want to shift at all, or wiggle your toes, or what do you want to do? What does your body want to do in this moment, just to let yourself acknowledge your body's experience? And now I invite you to come back to that feeling state or that noticing state. So what do you notice now? What's shifted in your mental state, your thought state, your feeling state? What's shifted? It's totally okay if nothing shifted, but to notice what has shifted, even a tiny bit. And just to note that to yourself. And connect with your breath. You might want to write a couple words down if that feels spacious for you to do so. And just to be curious. You know, sometimes we think, well, I should feel relaxed, or I should feel calmer now. And that's what this exercise isn't necessarily about feeling calmer. It's about being able to experience what you are experiencing, which might give you a calmer feeling. But its purpose is to be able to acknowledge how you are feeling, because the way through is usually in, dropping in to our experience of whatever's happening, instead of trying to muscle our way out of it. You know, often in the creative work and our creative practice, there's often this phrase, less is more. You might have had those of you in theater practice or dance practice of that kind of, or even as a musician, that push actually doesn't perform well, shall we say. I know that in my own creative work, there was a director who said to me, you know, let the audience come to you. Let them lean in a little bit more. And it's a similar thing in the experience of yourself. Instead of trying to make yourself relax or make yourself be calm or make yourself have this experience, notice what you are experiencing. Just like what you do with a friend and someone who is really dear to you, and if they were having an experience, it's very unlikely that you would tell them to stop having that experience. It's very likely you would sit beside them and hear their experience and listen to them. The same goes for you. So I'm just going to invite you to come back in and just notice what's happening now. What's shifted? What's shifted in your sensation, in your breath, in your thoughts, in your experience? And it's totally okay if this is a little bit hard for you, because sometimes it's hard to connect with our bodies. And especially sometimes hard when things are feeling really stressed out. So you can do just as much as you're able. Maybe you're just able to notice like the outline of your own body, or where your body's making contact on the couch or chair or floor, wherever you're sitting. Maybe that's what you have capacity for. And whatever you have capacity for is invited and welcomed. So the next thing I'm going to encourage you to do is called orienting. So we've checked in, how am I feeling? We've done a little arriving, connecting with our breath. We've tracked what's going on in my body and my thoughts, like how am I, those other layers. And orienting means, from the somatic experiencing perspective, is just taking a look at your environment. So I'm going to encourage you just to take a look around, just like what I'm doing. I'm in my one-bedroom apartment in North Vancouver, and I'm letting my eyes and my attention see where that wants to go. You know, sometimes when we try to manage these really troubling experiences, we race into the past or we live in regret. And of course, that makes sense that we sometimes do that, as to try to look after ourselves or protect ourselves. However, sometimes it can be really helpful just to notice what actually is going on in your present physical experience. So I'm just giving you time to just take a look, letting your eyes wander through the room, what's getting your attention, and see where your eyes and your attention want to land. So I'm just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds. And I'm going to encourage you just to take a little look around with your eyes, listen around with your ears, with your sense of smell. Just let yourself notice your environment for a moment. And then I'm going to invite you to check back in again, letting your attention roll back into your body and notice what's shifted in your thought state, in your body state, in your breath. What's changed, what's shifted. It's totally okay if nothing shifted or it's only shifted a little bit. Be with however you are in this moment. So now I want you to pick up your pen or pencil, whatever you have. Find a blank piece of paper. And again, this is just an invitation. This is nothing that you have to do. I'll tell you what we're going to do, and then you can decide if you want to participate or not. Or you can just listen. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you to consider something that's troubling you, something very specific to your experience. And just to make sure that's not one of the biggest things that's troubling you. Maybe it's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, no more than a 4. You can use this exercise for this bigger stuff, but it's good to just work in a smaller container right now, given the parameters of this experience. So it can be anything from, you can't get around as much, issues around groceries. That has a bit of a nattering mind thing in my mind, right? How to get groceries out of a car. And so how do I navigate all that? Could be something having to do with relationships or the people that you live with. So just allow that to rise into your mind. And again, I'm going to encourage you to sort of have an inward gaze or to close your eyes and to notice where you feel that uncomfort or discomfort at that issue, where you feel that in your body. And it's okay if you don't feel it anywhere in your body, but just if you do, just to make some contact with yourself with like where you feel it. So you might put your hand on your forehead because you feel it in your head, or on your chest, or on your belly, on your hips, wherever you feel that issue is kind of locating itself in your body. It might feel like it's all over. You get to have the experience that you're having. And so I want you to write down the issue. It could be a word, it could be a phrase. Communication with my roommate could be, the phrase, or having trouble sleeping might be the phrase. Irritability, loneliness might be the phrase. And to notice if you have a stance or a feeling about this issue. Now, this could be the same thing that you wrote at the beginning in that donut. So you could just go back to the donut you already wrote in, or you can make a new one. And do you have a feeling or a stance about it that kind of gets in the way of maybe you being able to experience the experience you're having? Like, for example, with communication issues, sometimes we feel like scared or nervous, right? Or not allowed. And just to notice that there might be that tension, and just see if you can just let yourself light on the issue or the experience or the feeling. and notice that there's this tension there. So now I just want you to sit with it for a moment. I have a couple prompting questions for you to mull over. And you can choose one or both of the questions, or you might have a question you like better, and you can use that question instead. So as you sit with this issue, groceries, communication, irritation, something that's troubling you, I'm going to encourage you to think about, what does this issue or this feeling need to soften or to shift? What does irritation need to soften or shift? Or the other question might be, what's the opposite? So for example, what's the opposite of irritation? Or what's the opposite of fretting? Like, that's what I do, I fret about groceries. What's the opposite of fretting? So the two questions, and you can choose one. What's the opposite of this experience? Or what would soften or shift this experience even a little bit? And it's okay if you don't know, but I'll encourage you to just take a wild guess. What might? And if you feel and want to take up the invitation to write down a few words, but what might shift or what's the opposite, I'll encourage you to do that. And we'll take about a minute or so. And just so that I'm not just staring at you on the screen, I'm going to write some things down as well. And then I'll tell you when a minute's up. You can always come back to this list. You might feel a little bit rushed, but you can always come back to this list. So about 20 seconds or so left. And then just put the last couple words or so down on your list. And I'm going to encourage you just to take a look at that list and choose the simplest next step. And if all the steps feel too hard, maybe just do the beginning of one of those steps. So what I mean by that, like one of my possibilities, so I don't fret so much, is just to organize my cupboards a little bit, to see a little bit more of what I have, so I don't worry so much. But if that felt overwhelming, maybe all I would do is just, I have a kind of a pantry. I would just step into my pantry and just look. That would be breaking it down. Or breaking it down might be, I'm just going to do one shelf. That might be breaking it down. So choose the simplest thing as the next thing. The easiest and simplest thing. Often we think we have to do the hardest thing first. Just do the simplest thing, the kindest thing. Sometimes the solution is not doing much at all. And then once you've chosen the simplest thing, put a little circle around that. And now I want you just to come back to the connection with your body. What are you noticing now? What are you noticing in that feeling state? In your breathing, in your thought state? Just letting yourself notice that. What's shifted, if anything? What's changed for you? And you can make a mental note of it, or you can write it down. How are you feeling now? What are you noticing now? It doesn't have to be a feeling state. You might notice the sensation of your body feels different. And not from a place of evaluating, but just from a place of gentle, curious noticing. It's not about being right or wrong, just about noticing what is. And from that place, deciding if there's anything that needs to be done. Sometimes just being with it is sufficient. So I'm just going to encourage us to take a couple breaths. We're coming close to the end of my formal part of the session. And I'm curious, and you can share this in chat, or you can just note it to yourself, of what stands out in this experience for you. What's one thing that stands out? And so before I give over to question and answer, I just want to talk about the way in which you might use any of these elements. So we started with checking in with ourselves. How are we doing? How am I doing? What am I noticing in this moment? Then we moved to tracking what's actually happening in my body right now. Then we shifted to orienting, taking a look at my space. Sometimes those of you who have dogs, right? As dogs naturally orient, they kind of check out their environment with their noses mostly, right? So it's just kind of like your inner canine. It's just like, what is actually going on in my senses? And then we moved on into working with some issue at hand. This is a way to kind of very gently consider, what's going on with me around a certain issue, to maybe help you understand what the next steps are going to be. I'll encourage you to do all the breathing stuff, the noticing stuff, the tracking stuff. It's best to do when the iron is cold, as opposed to using it for like triage. So as soon as you're highly activated, you're really stressed out, you're right in the middle of an argument, using these, it's harder to remember to do it if you haven't practiced it. So to do it when there's a neutral experience or a pleasant experience, like maybe a meal you're sharing with a friend on Zoom or something, to track and notice your experience then. Notice the pleasant experience of whatever you're eating or talking to your friend. Then you're more likely to remember when you're more activated. When things are more challenging, you'll more remember to drop in and breathe, to be able to track your own experience from that perspective. And I'm done. So now would be a time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for guiding us through this process. As a reminder for folks, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, or if you're on Facebook, then please put it in the comments, and we'll try and get to them, as many as we can. One of the things that strikes me about what you were talking about, Mercedes, is that often we, as individuals, talk a lot about the day's too busy and I can't slow down.
Yeah.
And I can't notice things. It's very hard to notice things as we are reflective. And the opposite is still true right now, that I've talked to people who say it's too slow, I can't notice things. And so do you have any just thoughts around that kind of that struggle between those two worlds of we're too busy or nothing is happening, so I can't see it?
Yeah. The thing about the feeling that nothing's happening, I would say it's somewhat of an illusion, because so much is actually happening. And sometimes we can feel very overwhelmed, and it just feels like we can't take very much in, right? So I would say a couple, self-regulation hacks can be, if you're feeling like you can't feel anything, or you're feeling like it just feels like too much, as soon as you notice that that's the experience you're having, that's awesome, because it means you're noticing it right now. And sometimes just to engage with your senses by going into the shower, letting water go onto your face, taking your shoes off and finding some cool ground, standing outside and feeling the sunshine, orienting to your experience. Like I have a balcony, so even standing out on your balcony, checking out what's actually going on. And, you know, because I think sometimes we say we don't have time, but that literally means you don't have time to, you don't have 30 seconds. You don't have 1 minute. Like this, what I did, it took about 20, but you could break any of those out and just allow yourself to feel your breath for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute. I think sometimes, there's right now, I would say we're in global shock. And those of you who've had the experience of either being in shock, like because of a car accident or something happened, or you've witnessed it, you can see people's behavior is not usual, right? Sometimes people they are not doing stuff that's kind of logical. They act in a way that's a bit odd. And that helps you kind of understand some of the peculiar behavior that we're witnessing, either in yourself or in other people, like the toilet paper hoarding, for example, is not logical, but it is logical in a panic state. There's a panicked logic because there's nothing about toilet paper that is going to solve a pandemic, right? However, there's a panic of like, I must do something. So that's what I would say is connect through your senses. Connect through your senses. Yeah.
You know, one of the questions is around. I mean, you've guided through a number of things around individual process, but what happens when, or what are your suggestions when you live with somebody and besides rewatching this recording later on and having access to it, but what are your recommendations for individuals who are watching this who might want to help somebody else in their family, in their household, whether remotely or in person?
Yeah, I think it's awesome if you have a human, or actually even creatures that live with you, to purposely co-regulate with them by having breathing time. If you are in the kind of relationship where you can have some kind of contact, if that's the kind of relationship that you're in with whoever you live with, to sit beside, to breathe together, to do things that help you anchor into this present moment. So I think it can be quite valuable, even with children, to teach them how to do the breathing and to teach them to, it's like, what sensations are you noticing in your own body, and to be able to share at that level. So the more attuned you are to yourself, the more you'll be able to be attuned to what's going on with other people. You also, not even paradoxically, but interestingly, are able to give more space for other people's experiences, the more space you have for your own. And so starting with yourself is the great, it's kind of like the great solution. Though sometimes we can find that we calm ourselves down by calming other people, but it's a drag if that person isn't calm. So often to be able to be connected to your own experience and then be able to invite somebody into that. Sometimes people will co-regulate just because you are intentionally taking your time. It helps them slow down as well.
What are one of the biggest blockers that you see in your practice for individuals who are going through crisis, or maybe not even realizing that they're going through a crisis, or PTSD kind of thing? Like what are those things, and how would you address it?
I would say that one of the bigger things, especially, you can just talk about this current experience. One of the big things that I'm noticing is that many people think that they should be accomplishing something. And my encouragement is, I'm not against anyone writing a novel or what, it's not like I'm against that, but to somehow that there's a kind of veil of a kind of morality if I don't, or worthiness if I don't accomplish something. But it's kind of like saying, okay, you've just been in a major shock. Now, could you now compose your new opus now? So I encourage people to go to the basics. and build from there. The basics are eating, sleeping, bathing. Eating, sleeping, bathing. Then you can layer in going outside. You can layer in any of those other beautiful creative practices. But sometimes we forget just the basics can help us regulate and find the rhythm. Find the rhythm by reconnecting, right? So eating, sleeping, and bathing are all about our bodies. Then our bodies can be as functional as they can be given the craziness and the disorienting experience, but we're allowing them to be optimal, right? We're allowing them to be optimal, that I feed myself fairly regularly, I bathe myself fairly regularly, and I try to sleep. And if I can't sleep, can I rest? Right? And resting just means doing restful activities, which sometimes is lying down, or like for me, I watch the birds in the tree by my balcony. That's restful for me, right? That puts my mind in a restful state. So I would say the biggest thing is this pressure that we have to do or be something, so that somehow if we make it through this, we can pronounce what we have accomplished. I would say that's the biggest pressure people put on themselves.
I will also recognize that kind of like what you're saying in terms of what do you do regularly, but what's your routine, and because for me, I make sure that I wake up at my usual time, I take a shower, and I do get dressed.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wearing similar clothes as
Yeah.
I do every day, but even acting like putting on jeans versus putting on shorts,
Yeah.
it does change the tone of my own body and the way that I walk, or my presence in a space as well. So routine, I think, is kind of also what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And we're talking about a gentle routine.
Right.
I'm not against people having other more formal stuff. It's awesome. But to somehow try to make yourself have this suddenly that maybe you never had before, that's a whole other deal, right? And that's a pressure that may or may not work right now.
So somebody, it's a shared reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So during the period in the exercise of reflecting on an issue, there were a few challenging experiences that I witnessed. To find something that was a number 4, like the thing that you're mentioning, things feel in the number 8 to 10 range currently. And then the other thing is to sink into attributing an emotion and listing opportunities. And then the third thing is I observed of the possibility of number 4 scenarios that came up. The situation that I chose didn't involve input from others. It seemed the more desirable piece to tackle because there was more control. Yeah. So, I mean, people are going to...
That's wonderful observing.
Yeah, and people are going to experience in various ways, right?
Yeah. And this was also quite quick, right? And, to just really acknowledge that a lot of things are going to be up at an 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? If you just lost work, there's pressure in your relationship, or you live alone and you're like profoundly lonely. There's like a lot that's going to, or there's people in your life who aren't well, or you're not well, or you're in pain, or there's so much that can be way up high. I only encourage that lower number, not because you had to have it, but it's just a little bit easier to do in a format, stuck in a screen, right? But just to acknowledge that a lot can feel hot right now.
This might be a good segue to talk a little bit about what you and I talked about around an offer after this session, because it is a very quick kind of process, and folks can come back to the recording, but what's the thing that you wanted to offer folks?
Yeah, so I wanted to offer the creative community experiential workshop series. It's 3 Friday afternoons in May that are by donation. I'm calling it Muse Work. And so we would connect to work a little bit in the way that we just did now, but we'll be able to drop in a little bit deeper. It's an opportunity for community, for other folk. It'll be live and probably on Zoom, so you'll be able to see each other and hear each other. So there's opportunity for community and for more conversing and more to talk around stuck places. So if there's an invitation that doesn't quite work, and we'd be using the creative process as our kind of catalyst. So writing, you don't have to be a writer to write, making images. You don't have to be a visual artist to make images. I mean, making marks on pages and doodling. You might use a little bit of sound if the group members are open to it. And very, very, when I say movement, I mean very, very subtle movement as the way in which your body wants to move. That might be encouraged. And the focus really is to tap into our the strength of our creativity and translate those processes to support our navigating this present experience. Because creative people do have that as a resource. The manner in which creative projects get created and the manner in which artists survive and thrive can be translated into surviving and thriving and navigating with a bit more ease crisis experiences. So so there'll be 3 Fridays in May, and you can sign up in or you can see the information. I think you're going to get an email that has
Yeah, so we'll send the information out in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow, and the information is on our website now as well. So if anybody's interested in continuing this process in an accessible way, then please check that out. Before we go, Mercedes, I mean, I also, thinking about where we are now and also where we could be moving forward, whether it's weeks, months, however long, what are the biggest kind of reminders for folks thinking about self-care or as a primary thing, and then community care as a secondary thing that they should remember throughout this process?
I would say, based on what you said, that the way in which we are able to care for our community as we define it hinges or is very directly related to how much we're able to care for our own capacity to regulate. We'll be more available for others the more that we're able to, as best we can, eat, sleep, bathe, care for our own beings. We'll have more availability for whatever is coming. And to know that while sometimes panic and fear might rise up in our bodies, of course it will, but to know that to make big decisions in those states are usually less fruitful. And that would be the other reason to practice self-regulating, is so that we can be more responsive when we are called to do whatever work needs to be done in the future. So that's what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mercedes, for being here. I really appreciate it. Again, for all of you, if you want to watch this session again, we're going to have the recordings available on our website, but it will also be emailed out to you, and as well as links to contact Mercedes again in the future. And for those of you, just as a reminder, that we do have another webinar in our Working Through This series on Thursday, and that one is focused on navigating current realities through Indigenous ways of knowing with Cease Weiss and Jolene Andrew. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with them as well. So again, thank you so much, Mercedes. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for spending the afternoon with us on another one of our webinars. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.